Linux is a very powerful operating system. It is very commonly used, and it's something that most likely you will run across in your journey in cybersecurity if you haven't done so already. It is so popular, in fact, that on top of everything that we're doing inside of the Cybersecurity 101, the CySec 101 series, I'm actually working on another complete training series on the Linux Plus certification, which is completely separate from this, so I don't want people to get confused by this. This is part of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe, and it just so happens that it's happening all at the same time. So most likely in the upcoming weeks, you're going to get a very strong education in Linux and how it applies to cybersecurity and hacking and ethical pen testing, all that good stuff. So what we're going to talk about today are the absolute fundamentals. We're going to be talking about the history of Linux, which is literally one of the most popular operating systems in the world. It's used in smart cars, Android devices, supercomputers, home appliances, enterprise servers, web servers, a lot of other examples as well. And you'll see more of that when we get into the Linux Plus certification series. And what we're going to go through is essentially running our first series of commands in an interactive Linux machine, teaching you some essential commands used to interact with the file system, and show you how you can search for files and introduce shell operators. So this is the basics, Linux Fundamentals Part 1. This is a part of a 3-part series that goes inside of the TryHackMe Cybersecurity 101 training series. So without further ado, let's get into it. A bit of a background on Linux. So where is Linux used? It's fair to say that it's a lot more intimidating to approach than OSs like Windows, because Windows has a GUI, right? It has a graphic user interface, a graphical user interface. So you can click around and there's a lot of point and click and you see things. When you think of Linux, more often than not, you think of the command line, and it's basically this black screen with a bunch of text on it. And for people who aren't familiar with just computers or really system administration in general, it can be intimidating. There are advantages and disadvantages to both of the GUI and command line interface. So for example, Linux is much more lightweight, and you'd be surprised to know how there's a good chance that you've actually ran across it in websites that you visited, the car entertainment or control panels inside of vehicles, point of sale systems, as checkout tills and registers in shops, critical infrastructure like traffic light controllers, industrial sensors. It's used literally everywhere. And the fun part about it is that there's a lot of the fundamentals of Linux that also run in OSs like Mac, as well as maybe not the syntax itself, but there is a lot of commonalities that you'll see that also runs across inside of the Windows operating system as well. There are a lot of flavors to Linux. We also call these distributions, or it could just be something people refer to as distros. They are based on Unix, which is another operating system that kind of came before Linux, and it was amplified a little bit, and it was developed by the ultimate father of Linux to become what it is today. Because it's open source, there's a lot of variants that have come in all shapes and sizes. So for example, we have Ubuntu and Debian, which are some of the more commonplace distributions because it's extensible, meaning you can run Ubuntu as a server, such as a web server or a web application, or you could run it as an actual desktop computer. So what we're going to be doing in this particular series especially is we're going to be using Ubuntu. And it runs on systems with only 512 megabytes of RAM, which, if you know anything about RAM, 512 megabytes is practically nothing. Most computers these days start with at least 8 gigabytes of RAM. So to be able to run on 512 megabytes of RAM, that means that it's very, very, it's lightweight, as they referred to earlier, or I forget what the technical term that they used was, but it's very light, right? It's something that can run with very little operating power. So since there are different versions of Windows, like 7, 8, 10, 11, etc., etc., there's also a lot of different variations and versions of Linux. So The first question that we have here is, what year was the first release of a Linux operating system launched? And so you can literally, because we've learned the search skills, you could just highlight this and search Google for it, and you'll get the answer right on the front screen right here, which is September of 1991 by Linus Torvalds. And this was 0.02, so it was the very, very first version of Linux. The most official version, which was 1.0, was released in 1994. So we'll talk about a lot of that stuff when we go into the Linux Plus video. I feel like this is kind of setting up everything for us to jump into Linux Plus, because we're going to review a lot of these things again in the Linux Plus video. And then, of course, we're going to go into a lot of the advanced stuff as well. So this is like a nice setup. This is a nice warm up to get into the Linux Plus video certification that will be dropping in a couple of weeks from the launch of this particular video. So really excited about it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually launch our first Linux machine, and you're going to get a chance to see what it's like to interact with it. As far as interacting with the machine is concerned, just for the purposes of this task, anytime that you're using any kind of a virtual machine inside of TryHackMe, there's always going to be a green Start Machine button, and it usually is also implied on the tab itself. So when you look at these tabs, usually there's this green icon right here, meaning that there's a machine that's attached to that particular task. So when you click on the Start Machine, it takes about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, just depending on what kind of machine is being launched. And then it's launched, and then you get an IP address that shows up at the very top right here. So it tells us that it's going to be shown in exactly 12 seconds, which is when it finishes. There's an expiration timeline that's attached to it, and if you want to extend it, you can always click on this button at the bottom right here, the plus button that extends your time. And from there, you get access to the machine itself. And in this particular case, we are looking at literally just the command line version. So there's no GUI interface that's associated with it. And if we were to look at this at the very top, we can see that this is an Ubuntu machine that's been launched right here. And this is just general system information that's available for it. And at the very bottom right here, we get the intro to our command line interface, and we can start running some commands in this thing. So I'm going to keep it inside of this this dual kind of a side screen, double screen right here, because we can technically open it up that looks like this, but it ends up kind of being, I mean, it's essentially the same thing. It's probably best actually to run it this way. So never mind, I retract my previous statement. I'm going to keep it like this, and we're going to look at it in a full screen. And you can accomplish this by just clicking the full screen button at the very bottom right there. And then when you click on the exit split view, then you go back to your normal view like this, and then you can just have your full screen of the Linux machine or any of the virtual machines that they assign you. You can have the screen like that. So that's what we're going to do for this particular exercise. So let's run through our first series of commands. Okay, so for the purposes of this, I have moved that previous tab that we had with the instructions on my second monitor. And on this monitor that you see right here, we're just going to look at the command line interface. And so I'm going to run through the various commands that they give us as I run across them inside of the instructions. And then from there, we're just going to go through our series of questions and answers and so on and so forth. But essentially, I'm just going to read whatever the command is, and I'm going to type it on the screen so you can actually see what the results are on the screen instead of reading it and then coming back and typing it, so on and so forth. So the first notification that we get is that, you know, at first glance, this can be a little bit intimidating, and I can understand, you know, literally from the perspective of somebody that's looking at this for the very first time. I remember looking at the command line the very first time, and it was also intimidating to me. So I don't want you to think of it as such, because if you literally just keep your mind open for a little bit, you will see how powerful this actually is and how quickly you can get things done, because you don't have to click around and browse. If you know what you're searching for, if you know what you're trying to do, it's so much faster to use the command line. So the very first thing that I'm going to type is the command clear, because I just want to clear my screen. So it just seems that clear or CLS are not available at all. Oh, there you go. I think there was a couple of glitches at the very beginning. But so if I type anything, so let's say I type who am I, it brings this over here. I type ls to list what's inside of my folder, etc., etc. And then you go through whatever you go through. And now you want to clear the screen, you just type clear, and then that will work perfectly fine for you. So clear clears our screen, and we only have our command line now at the very top right here. So easily viewable, and I will even zoom in a little bit more just to make it easy for you to see. Okay, so The first command, the very, very first command that we have is the command which is echo. So echo essentially spits back whatever you assign for it to spit back onto the screen. So this is a string. Everything that's inside of these quotations is considered a string. Even if I put numbers in there, technically, because it's inside of the quotations, it can be considered a string. So when I say echo this string, I'm essentially telling Linux to print it back for me as its response. And you can see that it responds back to me, hello friend, right? And you can do a lot of things with this. It kind of seems redundant, especially the first few times. It's like, okay, well, why am I doing this? Why would I tell it to just print something back for me onto the screen? But you can combine this with a lot of scripting tactics to verify whether or not your scripting is working, whether or not certain variables are working. So the echo command is actually very useful. We use it a lot. We can also use echo hello friend to put something inside of a file, right? So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I want to give you as much as possible. So in my current directory, so if I run pwd, my working directory that I'm in, we can see that we're inside of the home TryHackMe directory, and these are the contents of the home TryHackMe directory. And so what I can do is I can create a file by saying echo hello friend, and then using this arrow and pushing that data inside of a text file that we'll just call file.txt. And then I'm echoing that string to this text file. I press enter, and as you can see, nothing is printed onto the screen right now because, as we just saw previously, these were the contents of our current directory. So if I run it, now there's actually a new file inside of my current directory. And now I can concatenate this, and we'll probably run across this either today or maybe in one of the other fundamental exercises. Cat just prints the contents of whatever the file is onto your screen. So I can just do cat file text, and then it says hello friend because I put this string inside of this file by using echo, the string, and this forward arrow. I guess I call it a what is this? I think it's a greater than sign. So I will use that, and I will say put that inside of the file.txt, right? So if I wanted to do it again, so if I did hello just by itself, and then I'll just do it like that, and I'll do file.txt, what happens is that when we concatenate this, it's replaced our first line. So when you use one of these squigglies, it replaces the entire contents of the line. So if you want to add something to your file, you want to use two of these arrows, and you do that, and that's called appending. So you will append the data into your file, and now you have both of those strings in there. So just be very careful with using this by itself, especially if you don't want to rewrite everything that's inside of a file, because it doesn't ask you, hey, are you sure you want to rewrite this? It'll just execute that command for you. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're actually either wanting to completely rewrite it. You got to make sure about that. If you don't want to rewrite it, if you just want to add it to the file as the next line, which we call appending, then you can go ahead and use two of those symbols instead of just one. So that's what we got for echo. Now the next one is another one of those things that's very common. It's like one of those very, very common commands, which is who am I? So you're asking the system to tell you the user information, right? So what user am I currently logged in as? And you can also tell by the way that our command line is set up. It says TryHackMe at Linux. So TryHackMe in this case would be the user, at Linux1 would be the actual machine that we're logged in as. So I can say who am I is so and so. So if I could now again elaborate or extrapolate on this a little bit more, I can assign the value of who am I into a me variable. And the way that we would do that is I could just say me equals who am I, and let's see, I think I need to actually do it like this, so no spaces. Let's do that. Okay, there you go. So no spaces between your equal sign and your variable content. So I could say me equals who am I, and now I could do echo me, right, and it would print the next the series of content. Actually, so it's now writing this specific string instead of writing the value of the result right here, right? So instead of saying TryHackMe, because that would be the value itself, instead of doing that, it's just printing back the word onto the screen for me. So the way that we would want to accomplish this is we would actually need to use the very simple modification to this, is that we would just do me, and then I would still do equal, and then now I'm going to create the variable inside of a parentheses, a series of parentheses. And so now this variable is going to equal the value of the whoami command, the response of the whoami command, and it'll give us the actual response that we're looking for, which is TryHackMe. And then we can do this with a lot of different other commands as well that result with certain types of information. So for example, if I did uname, which is the name of the machine that we're on, we can also do the same thing, and you can build scripts this way where you can say, okay, the value of this, the value of who I am as a user is going to be the response to who am I, the value of my machine is going to be the response to this, and then you put all of that inside of a script, and then you run the script, and then all of that information will be printed onto your computer. Instead of you having to run a dozen different commands, you can just run a script, and then that script will run all of those commands and just output that information onto the screen for you. So this is why we use variables. And again, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I kind of like doing these things just to give you a little bit more information to work with as you develop this this skill set that you have. And when we actually get to the portion where we're going to be running variables and using variables in depth, you will have already been exposed to this information, and it won't be your first time viewing it, and you'll grab the content easier. You'll grasp the content easier, and because it's being repeated to you, it'll click better and you'll understand it better. So there's a reason why I do it. I do want to give you a little bit more than the basic fundamental instructions, because I know that the repetition of it in future videos will really make sure that it sticks, and it'll actually be ingrained in your memory. So this is what we have for what we had for echo and what we have for who am I. Those were the two specific commands that we ran in our particular exercise today. So what we have here is the questions at the bottom right here. So if it says, if we wanted to output the text TryHackMe, what would the command be? So it would be echo and then TryHackMe. Very, very simple. So what is the username of who you're logged in as on the deployed machine? And we already ran that, and it tells us that it was TryHackMe. So that is our very first series of commands that we ran with a Linux machine. So now let's go into the interaction with the file system. Okay, as we've already actually discussed a few of these already, so we've discussed the ls command, we've discussed the cat command, and the pwd command. There's one extra one that we haven't looked at yet. So what we're going to do is we're just going to run through the rest of these commands, or we're going to run them a few more times just so we can really get a good hang of them, and then we'll answer the questions that are at the bottom of this screen right here. So it'll tell us some more exciting pieces right here. So let's go back into our virtual machine here, which is our TryHackMe Linux, and then from there we're going to run the commands that we have been told. So the very first one that we want to understand, and I actually run pwd before I run ls because I always want to know where I'm at. And so when I run pwd, it tells me where I'm at, and then I'll run ls, and it says the contents of where I'm at. And then so we can see that we have these files. So there's a log file, there's the file that we just created in our last exercise, and then we have these directories right here. So folder 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what we can do is we can change directory by using the cd command, and then we can go into either one of these things, and now you can see the command line has actually changed and it's added the folder 1 at the end of it. And if I run pwd again, it'll say that now I'm actually inside of the folder 1 directory, and then I can run the ls command inside of the folder 1 directory, and there's nothing in it. It's technically empty. There is something that gets added to ls to actually show you the hidden files that may be inside of this thing that you may not be able to see by just running a basic ls command, and that would be la. And in this particular case, there's actually nothing inside of this file at all. There are no hidden files and nothing else. what we do see is these two entries right here, which is dot dot, which represents going back one directory inside of our hierarchy. So we would go from folder 1 back into TryHackMe, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then the dot represents the current directory that I'm in. So if I had a script in here and I wanted to run it, for example, I would do dot / and then the name of the script, if there was actually a script inside of it, which means I'm implying that I want to run, that's the entire path that I'm in. I want to run this path. That's what the dot represents. I want to run everything inside of this path and / whatever that file is inside of it. Since I don't have anything inside of this, I can do cd and do dot dot, because I have this right here, and that would take me back one directory, and you can see that the command line has now changed. And if I did pwd again, and now we can see that we're inside of the home TryHackMe. If I do dot dot again, I'll go into home, right? So I'm no longer inside of the TryHackMe user. And you can also see that this squiggly line right here has changed, and now it's a / and it's inside of home. So if I do pwd, now it says my current directory is / home. And if I do ls, we'll see that we have actually two users inside of our home directory. And the home directory has all of the contents of the users inside of that specific machine. So let's clear this up and do ls one more time. And now we have TryHackMe and Ubuntu, which are our users. The user that we're supposed to interact with is TryHackMe. So if I try to go to Ubuntu, I feel like, oh, I can go into Ubuntu. There's nothing inside of Ubuntu, and these are the hidden files. So now you see when we do lsla, we actually have hidden files that do show up here. And you have the bash history, and we have the bash logout, the cache profile, SSH. These are all beyond the scope of this room, so I'm not going to go into that because it's just not worth it to try to spend time on that right now. We're literally doing basic fundamentals. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back one more time, and then we're going to go inside of our TryHackMe user one more time. And now we have these contents of this folder. So what we've covered is pwd, which gives us our working directory. It prints the working directory. We've covered ls to print the contents of the screen, and then, or the contents of the directory, excuse me. And then we've covered cd. So if we go into the folder 2 and list it, there's nothing in there. Let's go into folder 3. There is nothing in there. So let's go into folder 4. And okay, there's actually a note inside of folder 4. So now we can use our last command in this particular task, which is cat, so which stands for concatenate, which essentially prints the content of that file onto our display here. So if I do cat note.txt, it'll say hello world. So it's actually very similar to the note that we already created with file.txt, which had hello, hello there, so on and so forth. So it actually has these various strings inside of it. So now we've covered all 4 of these commands, and you've seen me use it multiple times, and hopefully you're also doing this on your own virtual machine, or maybe you're inside of TryHackMe and you're doing it. But this also applies to the Mac OS as well. All of these commands, so if you're by any chance, if you're watching this from a Mac computer, all of these commands also apply to a Mac computer. So you can do pwd inside of a Mac computer and it'll print your current directory. You can do ls, and ls doesn't apply to Windows machines. Not all of them. Sometimes it actually does work, but most Windows machines have dir that lists the contents of the directory, and you can see it actually works over here as well, but in this sense it doesn't highlight or it doesn't colorize the folders that we have over here, so we can't really tell if these things are directories or files or what they are. So in this particular case, because we know that we're in a Linux machine, what we're going to do is we're going to run ls, and it will go ahead and print these things for us. And if I did lsla, it'll actually again show me everything as well as the hidden files. But then now we can see over here some extra information that would be assigned to the file itself, the date that it was created, the various user IDs or the usernames that were used to create it, the group permissions that are assigned to it, which are, again, these are beyond the scope of this particular room, so I'm not going to go into that. But this is just a nice extension of the ls command for you to be able to at least find hidden files, or to be able to see certain data about the files that are inside of that directory. So we have ls that we've covered. One more time, ls we've covered, cd, folder 4, we covered that. And then we have pwd, which tells us which directory we're in. And now inside of that folder, we have this note. So we can do cat note.txt to print the contents of that note. And now we have the contents of that note. And so if we go into our questions here, I bet you they're going to ask about all of that stuff, right? So it says, on the Linux machine you deploy, how many folders are there? Which were 4 folders. Which directory contains a file? It was folder number 4. What is the content of the file? It said hello world, but there's actually an exclamation mark at the end of that, which I don't know why they didn't accept the first time. And then so use the cd command to navigate to this file and find out the new working directory. What is the path? And we accomplished this by doing pwd. Excuse me, that was so disgusting. I kind of burped as I don't know if you heard that, but whatever, I'm just gonna leave it in. That was really that was so embarrassing. pwd, and that would print the working directory. That was really bad. I'm sorry guys, I'm so sorry about that. That's so embarrassing. Anyways, let's move on. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, now what we're gonna go over is the find command as well as the grep command, and they're both actually extremely useful, and you will use these very, very frequently. So the purpose of find is to literally look for something that you know exists, you just don't know where it is. So instead of doing cd and changing directories to every single directory and doing ls to find what is available inside of that directory, you can just use find. So in this particular case, we now know that I have the file.txt that is in my current directory, and then I also know that there is a note.txt that is inside of the folder 4 directory. So let's say that I am currently inside of the home TryHackMe, so we're going to clear that over here, and what I want to do is I want to search for anything that is a txt file, right? So I can just do find and then use that as my command to search for the information, right? So what I can do is I can do find, and then I can do name, which means I'm looking for something by its name, and then we'll use the asterisk, which stands for a wildcard character that would essentially be anything. So anything that ends with txt, that's what I want to look for. So I run that and it says, oh, you know what, inside of your current directory you have something called a file.txt file, right? And that exists right there. Something else that I can do is I can do find and then run the /, meaning find recursively inside of the entire thing. So instead of this one, just looks for the file inside of my current directory that I'm in. But if I did find /, and again, I could actually make this a little bit easier for the computer. So instead of doing find /, because what it would do is it would search for everything that is inside of the root, which is represented by this / right here. So it will look inside of home, it will look inside of TryHackMe, it will look inside of that Ubuntu user as well. So instead of doing that, I can just say find inside of the home TryHackMe by something by the name that has the txt extension, and it'll again still say that. So now I think what I want to do is I want to try to find that other txt file that we have, and now we can see that there's a lot of other information that's going to show up onto the screen because there's so many other files that we don't have permission to access. But there is something on here that you should be able to find ultimately as it tries to continue to look for us. There should be something that we can find. So there's the file.txt that exists on the home, and then let's see if that other file also exists, because we know for a fact that there's one inside of the folder 4, right? We know there's something inside of folder 4. So how do we find what we're looking for and avoid all of these permission denied messages? Because it can provide a lot of noise, and now I can't scroll up anymore because there's just so much data onto the screen. So I know for a fact that I'm not going to be able to find exactly what I'm looking for. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an extra parameter, and I'm again kind of just teaching you some extra things that you may not necessarily need right now. We're going to look for something by the name of the /txt or the *.txt, and then we're going to remove all of our error messages and we're going to put them inside of our dev null folder. So we won't see anything other than the actual file that we find. But it's interesting that it won't show me what is inside of the folder number 4. That's the thing that I'm very, very fascinated by. So for now, we know that we can use find to find a file. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the rest of the instructions that we have in this particular task. And then from here, we'll see if there's anything else that might be interesting or of note to us. And then maybe we can find something else that hopefully will help us get the result that we're looking for. So that was find. So if you know that you're looking for something that is a text file, or if you know, you can, let's see if we can run the other command that they had, which is something called passwords.txt, right? So they did a search for that and nothing showed up for us for passwords.txt because there's nothing inside of any of our folders that actually have that. So we can go ahead and try to see if there's something else that we can run to try to look for what we're looking for here. Okay, so just because I'm a little bit obsessive, I actually removed that file that I created myself. So now that I run it, we can see that it no longer exists right here. And the way that I did that, I just used the remove command and I gave it the file name, and so it removed the file. So now when I actually run the find command and trying to look for something that has an extension of txt, now for whatever reason, it actually shows me that inside of folder 4, there is a note.txt. So that part is actually interesting to me. I don't know why I didn't list everything that was available, but all I had to do was remove that other file and it worked, which is, it's just very interesting that that's the case. It should bring up everything that has an extension of txt, but whatever, we'll move on. For the interest of time, I don't want to get too caught up with trying to do troubleshooting and all these things, because I have to constantly remind myself that this is a fundamentals room and we're going through fundamentals. So we have found our file using the name.txt, and now it works, right? Everything is fine. So what we can do is now grep. Grep stands, actually it's for searching. It doesn't stand for searching, but it's something that we use to search through the contents of a specific file. So in the actual instructions, they have given us this other command, which is the wc, that actually counts the number of entries that are inside of a given file. And so if we do wcl, we're going to be counting the lines inside of a file. And so we have an access log. So if I do that, now it says there are 302 entries inside of the access log file. So that's a lot of entries for you to try to concatenate, right? So if I actually do cat of access log, we'll see that there is a lot of files over here. There are a lot of entries over here. And this can get very overwhelming to try to manually search through. So what we need to do is we need to find something that is of interest to us. And the way that we would do that is by searching for that entry inside of that file. So this is where grep comes in. So let's say we actually have an IP address that we're interested in because somebody told us to look for anything that had to do with this particular IP address, or it's an IP address that was shown up in some kind of a database to be malicious. So we have to actually create a script that looks for this IP address in any of our log files. And if it finds it, it needs to give us some kind of an alert, right? So we've been given an IP address. In this particular case, the IP address is 81143.211.90. That's the IP address. So that's what I'm searching for. So I will do grep and I will put the entry that I'm searching for, and then I need to give it the place that I wanted to search through, which in this case is going to be our access log. So we run that and nothing, for whatever reason, it doesn't exist. So 143.211.90, 81143.211.90. In my particular case, it does not show up anything. So that was the command that was ran, and actually the exercise that we have, or the instructions, right? So what they did right in this particular case, they actually grepped for that IP address and they got a response from it. But in our particular case, there was nothing about that IP address in our log. So that's not applicable to us in any kind of way. But for the question that we need to answer, the first one is that use grep to search for the prefix of THM inside of the access log file. So I can just do grep and I can run THM like this and then do access log and see what shows up, and there it is. So get THM access, etc., etc. That is the line item. So instead of going through all of those 300 line items that we found, we can just grep for the piece that we're looking for. And in this particular case is get THM access, which is the answer that we're looking for, which in this particular case, I've already done this room, so it already exists here. So use grep on the access log to find the flag that has a prefix of THM, and what is that flag? And that is our flag over here. So it's, you know, fairly simple. They don't give us too many things to do. I like to go off script, and I like to do things and do side missions, so to speak, which is probably why that initial find command didn't work, because I did the side mission in a previous thing and I created a file when I probably shouldn't have created a file, and so the system couldn't find the file. So that's how it worked. So now we can move on to our next task, which in this particular case are the shell operators. Okay, so what's nice is that I've actually covered these two operators down here, so you should already be familiar with them. And we can now talk about the full list, and then you'll get another review of these two operators. So we have the ampersand operator, which allows you to run commands in the background of the terminal. You have the double ampersand, which allows you to combine multiple commands together in one line, meaning it'll run multiple commands at the same time. You have the single greater than operator, which is a redirector, meaning that we can take the output from a command, like using cat to output a file and redirect it somewhere else, or using echo, for example, to redirect it somewhere else. And then you have the double, which the same function, but it appends, meaning it adds to the file instead of rewriting the contents or replacing the contents of that file. And so these are our operators. So we can run the various commands that they've given us in this particular case to try to kind of go through everything that we got over here, and then finally answer the questions that we have at the bottom right there. So let's go through the various commands that they've given us and just try this out a little bit. Okay, the first one is the operator ampersand by itself. And in this particular case, we don't actually have a command, but I do want to kind of show you a sample command of what that looks like. So essentially what it does is that it allows you to execute a command in the background. So for example, let's say you want to copy a large file and you know that it's going to take a really long time. And because it's going to take a long time to complete, you won't be able to do anything else until that file is completed. Meaning, since you're in the command line and you only get one terminal, you only get one command line here, until that command completes, you won't be able to do anything else. So what you want to do is you make that command run in the background so that you can still use the terminal to do other things. So this is what that might look like. So copy stands for copy, or CP stands for copy, I should say. And actually, let's look at this. So let's say we have the access log, for example, right? And I want to copy it to folder 1, and I don't want to do it in the foreground. I want to do it in the background. So what I would do is I would do CP, and I would do the access log, right? I want to copy that file, and I want to copy it to the folder 1. So I'll just do ./folder1, and then I'm going to do and at the very end of it, so it runs in the background. And then that's it, right? So if I should go to folder 1 and, cd folder 1, and if I run what the ls command would be, now it's been copied and it's inside of the folder 1. And this wasn't a massive file, so it happened instantaneously. But if it was a massive file, I wouldn't be able to use my terminal until that copy was done. But because I did the ampersand at the very end of it, so let me just show you the full command one more time just so you can see it. Since I did this ampersand at the very end of it, it ran in the background, right? So that's the piece that is very useful in this particular case, and that's what you need to know, is that you just put ampersand at the very end of it, and it'll just run everything in the background. So that's the piece that that's how you apply this particular specific operator. Now the next one is the double ampersand. So you have two commands that you want to run, for example. And you can combine those specific commands to make life a little bit easier. So instead of running the single command, you can run two, right? There are a few ways that we can use that. So we haven't been given any examples. They just said that, you can do command 1 and command 2. But let's say we actually want to, for example, create a new directory, right? So I can say make directory, and I can do new directory, right? And so let me just do it all in one word, because it can get kind of confusing because it doesn't show underscores when you're inside Linux. So it looks like it's an empty space when it's actually an underscore. So you do make dir, so make directory to create the new directory. And then I want to go into that directory. So I'll do cd new directory. And then you press that. And then now all of a sudden we're inside of this new directory right here that previously didn't even exist, right? And so there's nothing inside of this new directory. If I go back and run ls, now we'll see we actually have this new directory at the end right here. So that's very interesting, right? That's how you can run that and actually run multiple commands at the same time. But let's say you want to run 3 commands now, which is kind of an interesting thing, right? So I can do touch my file. So touch my file.txt would be one command. And then I can do and then I can do echo file created successfully, which will just print that onto the screen, right? So I'll get a notification from the system saying, oh, the file was created successfully. And then I can do another series of and commands, and I can do cat, or well, I'm not going to be able to cat really anything because it's going to be empty. So what I can do in this particular case, I can do another echo. I'll just do another echo, and then I'll just say contents, and then I'll put that inside of the myfile.txt. So let me just show you what that looks like, right? So now I've echoed another echo command, and that puts the string contents inside of the myfile.txt. And now I can go ahead and cat the myfile.txt, and I should be able to see those contents in there. So I've created a file, and I've echoed file was created successfully. So this just prints onto the screen just to give me a notification that it did what it was supposed to do. And then I've echoed contents inside of that file, and now I can concatenate or print what's inside of that file onto my screen. So I run this, and we got 2 things, right? So the first one was file was created successfully, which is our notification, and then it actually echoed contents to that file, and then it printed that onto the screen. So you can chain multiple commands together by using and. That's essentially the whole purpose of the double ampersand. So now we can go and cover the other 2 operators, which we've actually already done, right? So I've done the specific for the first one, which is this piece right here, this a greater than symbol that puts the contents of something inside of the file. So now what we can do is we can apply that. We can apply multiple strings together and concatenate this to the original file, right? So what we can do is we can replace. So I'll do the first one as a replace. So instead of being contents, it'll say new contents. That'll be the replacement. So we should not have contents as the first line. So we have echo new contents, and then what we want to do is we want to also echo additional, so contents. And instead of doing a single, because I know it would replace it, I'm going to do another one. And again, and oh, actually, you know what? I need to tell it to echo those contents inside of something, right? So it's going to the new contents. It's going to, I need to fix this piece real quick. So it's going to be new contents, and it's going to be echoed inside of the myfile.txt. So that's going to replace the contents of the file. There you go. And now I have the new string, which is going to be additional contents, and I'm going to add that to the second line of the myfile.txt. And then once that's all done, what I want to do is I want to cat that contents onto the screen, which is going to be hopefully these 2 strings. It should be new contents and on the next line it should be additional contents, and both of those should print onto the screen, and voila, there we go. So we have new contents. So when you do this single one, it replaces everything that's inside of that file, and then when you use the double right here, it adds it, it appends it to the file, as we can see right here. And now we did a chained series of commands, which is used by the ampersands and the operator. So a very, very useful series of commands right here. And now we've officially covered all of the contents of this particular task. So we can go back and we can try to answer these questions that we have right here. So the very first question at the top says, if we wanted to run a command in the background, what would we use? We would put and at the very end of it, so a singular ampersand. If I wanted to replace the contents of a file named passwords with password123, what would be the command? So I would say echo password123 inside of passwords. Very, very simple. Now, if I want to add TryHackMe to that file, but also keep the original, what would we use? Which is the double arrows, I guess we can call them. And that would be echo TryHackMe with the double arrows inside of passwords. And now we have both passwords123 and TryHackMe inside of passwords. And now we can use the deployed machine to put those in practice, which we've already done. I'm not going to do this specific thing because we did so many different examples here already. So you should have an understanding of how to do those commands and how to run those commands. So we can actually move on to our conclusion. Okay, so hopefully this was not too crazy. I know I kind of veered off script a few times, but I was just trying to make sure you really got a good understanding of what was going on. We're going to go over this so many times and over these various basic commands so many times that you're going to get very familiar with them, and it's going to become second nature for you, and you're going to learn how to navigate file systems and create files and append content to files, so on and so forth. You're going to be able to do this like it's nothing. You're going to do it in your sleep, and like my dogs are sleeping in the background. So this was essentially the summary of it, right? So we understood why it's such a commonplace platform, why Linux is such a commonplace operating system. We've actually deployed and interacted with our very first Linux machine. We ran some of the most fundamental commands, such as ls and who am I and echo, so on and so forth. We had an introduction to navigating around the file system using things like cd, right, change directory, and how we can use commands like find and grep to find the data that we need more efficiently. And of course, we have learned about some of the most important operators, for example, chaining multiple commands together using double ampersands, which is actually very useful, because if you know what you're doing, then you can chain the commands and make this super long command instead of writing boom, 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 one after another, especially if you want to have it run in the background, right? You can chain multiple commands together, and at the very end of it, put a single ampersand, and it'll run everything in the background, and then you'll be able to accomplish a lot. So that was it for everything that we talked about, or everything that we did inside of our very first Linux fundamentals room. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go into Linux fundamentals part 2. I also do want to note that this was actually a free room, so if you have just a basic free membership with TryHackMe, you can launch that virtual machine, that Linux machine inside of this room, and run all of the commands. If you don't by any chance have a Linux machine or access to a Linux machine, you can just run it for free inside of this TryHackMe room, which is the Linux Fundamentals Part 1, which was a part of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway. Alright, so if you found this video useful, and if you want to get access to more videos like this one as we go along the CySec 101 pathway, I do encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. And of course, drop a comment if you have any questions. I do respond to all the comments. And if you have a really good question or a comment, I'll create a video in response to your comment. So make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. And then there is the Hackaholics Anonymous membership community, which is the premier YouTube community for cybersecurity and hacking. And we have 4 tiers with a lot of great perks attached to them. And even the very basic tier, the very first tier that you can get access to for $4.99, you get your own Discord server that's available, that you get access to me and all of our advanced members. So if you have any questions or if you want to talk to somebody as you go along this journey, you can get access to somebody like that and ask all your questions. And of course, there's the advanced tiers as well, that you get things like Python automations, and you get things like exclusive content and manuals and a bunch of other stuff that there's a lot. The tiers and the perks attached to those tiers go pretty deep. So if you don't want to watch this 14-minute video that's right here, you can just click on this read more button at the bottom, and then you can go through the descriptions, and the description will also list everything that's inside of Hackaholics Anonymous. So if you haven't already checked that out, make sure you check out Hackaholics Anonymous and save it for future if you don't want to join right now, because I promise you this is going to be the biggest group for ethical hacking and pen testing and cybersecurity that exists on YouTube. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker / protector. Love, peace, and chicken grease. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. I will see you in the next video. Later. Peace.